Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we're heading into the cold hills of Appalachia. 10 true stories from November's quiet backroads, where the fog stays late and the dark feels alive. These aren't legends or campfire tales. They're stories of ordinary people who saw something they shouldn't have and never forgot it. Before we begin, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me where you're listening from, because one of these stories might have happened closer than you think. Now then, let's begin. My name's Brandon Lyle. I was 29 when I moved back into my grandfather's old cabin, the one at the end of Lanesbury Road near the Hollow, tucked behind a crooked fence and 3 miles of gravel nobody bothers to pave. I told people I just needed space, which was true. The bigger truth was, I didn't have anywhere else to go. Grandpa left me the place in his will. I remember him sitting out back with a tin cup of coffee, never saying much, just watching the tree line like it might shift when no one was looking. The cabin had 2 rooms, 1 bathroom, a sloped roof that whined every time the wind kicked, and a basement hatch built right into the kitchen floor. He called it a root cellar, but I never saw roots in it, just his old gear, some tools, and 1 heavy black flashlight he never let anyone touch. My life there fell into a rhythm. I worked full-time at the mill down by the state line, came home around 6, ate whatever I had in the freezer, and let the old radio murmur in the background while I sat at the kitchen table. No visitors, no schedule. Really, I'd fall asleep with the TV on, wake up around 5, and do it all again. I actually liked it for a while. The quiet, the routine. But looking back, I think the quiet liked me a little too much. That night started like the others. I took the trash out behind the house, following the narrow path Grandpa used to stomp through the brush. The wind had picked up, colder than usual, and most of the trees were bare now, just black lines against the night. I was about to turn back when I saw him. A man, standing way out by the ridge, barely visible between 2 trees. Not moving, just facing the house. I stared for a second, maybe longer. Thought it might be a hunter, or someone from the next hollow over. But when I blinked, he was gone. The trees still rocked in the wind. The shadows still stretched across the dirt, but there was no one there. I went inside. I didn't lock the back door. Should have. I had heard the footsteps earlier, just outside the shed, but I told myself it was windfall. Maybe a raccoon nosing through the leaves. The next morning I checked the yard, just in case. That's when I saw them. Wet boot prints under the bay bush by the side entrance. Clear as anything. They pointed toward the house, not away. No sign of turning back. No other tracks nearby. I told myself it could have been mine from the night before, even though I'd worn sneakers and taken the other path. Or maybe someone had wandered too close looking for firewood. Not uncommon around here. Still, I went down to the cellar to check the old gear. Something felt off. It had been weeks since I last opened that hatch. But when I pulled it up, I saw right away. The flashlight was gone. Grandpa's flashlight. The one that always sat on the second shelf by the jar of nails. It was just not there. I searched the rest of the shelves. Nothing out of place, except that night I changed the lock on the side door, left the kitchen light on. I even kept the radio off, which I never did. I don't know why, but silence felt safer somehow. Around 2 in the morning, I was almost asleep when I heard a sound from the kitchen. A short knock, then 2 more, like someone tapping the table with their knuckles. I sat up and listened. Nothing, just the whine of wind and the old rafters shifting. I stood in the hallway for a long time, didn't move, didn't speak. And then the radio clicked on. Soft static first, then, faintly, like it was playing from another room across the street. 3 knocks. Then silence again. I opened the front door. No one. Just the yard, the trees, and the air standing too still for a night with that much wind. But when I turned back toward the kitchen, the hatch was open. Not all the way, just tilted, like something had pushed it up from underneath. And on the wood beside it, leading upward, were fresh, wet boot prints. I locked the hatch and shoved the fridge halfway over it, just to make sure it stayed down. After that, I sat in the corner of my bedroom with the bat across my lap, the nightstand flashlight in my hand, and every light in the house still burning. I didn't sleep, just stared at the door, listening. By the time the clock on the stove hit a little past 3, I knew I wasn't going to make it till morning. No signal on my phone. I tried calling twice. The first rang half a beat, then cut off. The second didn't even try. Just a red bar and silence. Around 4, I heard it again. 3 knocks. Then a pause. Then 3 more. This time it came from the front door. I didn't move, just held my breath and listened. The footsteps came next. Slow and steady, moving along the outside walls. 3 steps. Stop. 3 more. Like someone circling the house with no need to rush. I could hear the weight of them through the floor. Then the side door shook. Hard, like someone threw their shoulder into it. There was a sharp hiss of breath. Close. Too close. Right behind the wood. Not a growl. Not a whisper. Just slow, heavy breathing. I pulled the dresser across the back window. My plan, if I had one, was to crawl out and run through the trees toward the road. But when I grabbed the latch, I heard the cellar hatch creak. Not from pressure, not from old wood, from movement. Something was pushing it open from underneath. I stayed frozen for maybe 5 seconds. Then I lunged for the window. It stuck at first, then gave with a snap. I scrambled through, falling onto the dirt, one knee hitting a rock. I was already up when I heard the floorboards behind me groan. I ran. Branches clawed at my shirt. My legs slipped on wet leaves. I didn't stop until I hit the edge of the property. And then, against every instinct I had left, I looked back. There was a figure standing in the doorway. But it wasn't just a man. Its shoulders were hunched, rising too high near the neck, like they were forced into place. Its arms hung low, past its knees, and the skin looked too smooth, like wet paper. The legs bowed inward, as if its joints bent the wrong way. The head sat lopsided, like it had been placed there, not grown. And in its hand, held chest high like a trophy, was Grandpa's black flashlight. It wasn't pointing at me. The beam was turned toward the woods, sweeping slow, back and forth, like it was searching for something else out there. I didn't wait to find out what. I ran until the sun rose. A state trooper found me walking barefoot down the main road just outside Spruce Hollow. I told him I got turned around after chasing off some trespasser. He asked if I needed a medic. I said no. I left everything behind. 3 weeks later, I had an apartment above a storefront in town. Small place. No trees. No basement. Every night I locked the windows. I bought blackout curtains. White noise machine. Neighbors on both sides. But sometimes, I still wake up at 4 a.m. for no reason. And the radio in my kitchen clicks on by itself. Soft at first, then louder. Right before it goes dead again. Just long enough to hear it. Knock. 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 If you've ever camped out at Ridgeback Hill, don't look toward the summit after 2 in the morning. And if you do, don't say anything. Don't ask your friends if they saw it too. Don't even whisper. We went back to Ridgeback to mark 10 years. 10 years since the 3 of us, me, Jordan, and Caleb first pitched a tent there during our junior year. Back then, we didn't make it through the night without spooking ourselves silly. Heard a few strange sounds. Something moving in the brush after midnight. Maybe a deer or an owl. But none of us dared climb the ridge. Not once. Now we were older. Supposedly braver. Caleb had this idea to film everything, to make a short video, both for nostalgia and to finally debunk the campfire rumors. Local talk about Ridgeback being a place you're not supposed to film after dark. He brought his infrared camcorder. Said it'd be fun to prove once and for all there was nothing up there. Jordan and I mostly went along for the ride. We figured it'd be cold beers, old stories, and maybe a little closure. Just three guys in their 20s trying to relive something simple before life split us in different directions. The camp sat against the hillside, tucked low into the trees, with one wide clearing for tents and a rusted fire ring we never used. The nights up there held a kind of silence I forgot existed. No bugs, no cars, just a heavy stillness pressing against the sides of the tent. We were half joking about it the first night. That old man at the gas station, with his fogged-over glasses and fingers like roots, had told us the rule as we bought propane. If you see anything on the hill after dark, don't film it, and don't tell your buddy to look. Caleb grinned the whole time, like he was waiting for the guy to say, "Just kidding." But he never did. We set up 2 tents, one for Jordan and me, one for Caleb and his gear. That first evening was easy. We made soup, passed around jerky, and watched the moon rise through the bare trees. Caleb fiddled with his camcorder, trying to catch something cool in the dark. He switched it to infrared and pointed it up the slope. "Camera's going glitchy," he said, tapping the screen. "Weird flare at the top left." "The reason?" Jordan leaned over and squinted. "There," he said. "That blur. Looks like somebody standing still. Antenna for play." It was barely a second. Just one frame where the image bent. Like something was there and then wasn't. Caleb shrugged it off. Said the lens was cheap and the cold messed with the sensors. I didn't think much of it either. Ridgeback was full of shadows, and the moon didn't always behave like you wanted it to. We called it a night and zipped up around midnight. I remember thinking the stillness was kind of peaceful. Next day, nothing strange happened. We hiked a bit, collected dry wood, made eggs on the camp stove. But Jordan was quieter than usual. At one point, I caught him staring up the hillside, eyes narrowed like he was trying to see through the trees. "What's up?" I asked. He shook his head. "Just thought I saw someone earlier. By that big cedar bend. Not of today." I glanced that way. Nothing but brush and bare limbs. That night, we kept the fire low. Just embers and a little glow. Around 1 in the morning, Jordan stepped off to take a leak, flashlight in hand. When he came back, he crouched beside me and spoke low. "There's someone on the hill," he said, squatting, just watching. "He's not the dice." Caleb already had his camcorder in hand. He stood and aimed it up where Jordan pointed. "I don't see anything," he said. But a few minutes later, when we played back the footage, it was there. A faint shape between 2 trees. Upright, but not quite. Its head was tilted sideways, like a dog listening for something, and the arms hung too long. Caleb stopped the video and set the camera down. Nobody said anything for a while. We zipped up early that night, but no one really slept. I could hear Jordan rolling over every few minutes. Caleb's breathing was clipped and shallow. I stared at the ceiling of the tent, listening to the wind move through dead branches. Just past 2 a.m., I heard it. A slow scrape, like nails against the fabric above us. Not tearing, just dragging. We all sat up. Jordan unzipped the flap an inch and peeked through. Then he froze. Caleb and I leaned in behind him. At first, we didn't see anything. Then, higher up the hill, something moved. It was crawling sideways, not down. 4 limbs low to the ground, back arched like a broken arch. The head craned upward, angled straight at our camp. Caleb whispered. "It saw us. They're Rishans." We yanked the flap shut and killed the lights. No one spoke. Outside, something was running, but not downhill. Across. circling, four-footed, fast, and getting closer. Jordan was the first to move. He grabbed my arm and hissed, "We have to go." Before I could argue, he unzipped the tent and bolted into the dark. Caleb snatched his camera and stumbled after him. I followed, heart hammering, the cold air burning my throat. The world outside felt wrong. The air was too thick, the shadows too deep. Our flashlights swung wildly, beams cutting through fog that hadn't been there an hour ago. We ran toward the trail that led down the hill, the sound behind us shifting from footsteps to something heavier. It wasn't the sound of paws. It wasn't the rhythm of a man running. It was uneven, almost doubled, like two movements happening at once. A wet, dragging pace that made my stomach twist. Caleb tripped first. His camera hit a rock and bounced into the leaves. Jordan turned, grabbed him by the jacket, and pulled him up. I looked back just once. It was standing now. Not crawling, not hiding. Standing on two legs near the edge of the tree line. Its shape didn't hold steady, like the air itself couldn't decide what it was looking at. Its head hung to one side, neck bent too far, and those arms, long and slack, touched the ground even upright. I shouted for Jordan to move. The creature tilted its head farther, almost horizontal, as if it was trying to listen. Then it started down the hill. We ran. Branches tore at my jacket, mud slid under my shoes, and the fog grew thick enough to swallow the beam of my flashlight. Jordan was ahead, half pulling Caleb, both breathing in gasps. I could hear it behind us. It was close. I could feel its rhythm matching ours. 4 steps, then 3, then 4 again. The breath that came with it was a rough wheeze, deep and wet, like lungs full of mud. Caleb cried out, something short and sharp. I turned and saw his knee buckle. He fell again. Jordan went down with him, trying to lift him up. The sound behind us grew louder, pounding the earth like it was shaking loose, the hill itself. And then it was right there. I could feel it before I saw it, a rush of heat at my back. Its breath hit the side of my neck, hot and damp, smelling like iron and dirt. I didn't think. I just swung my arm, hit Caleb's shoulder, and yelled for him to move. Headlights. Down the path, yellow light cut through the fog. A truck engine rumbled, gears grinding as it came around the bend. Jordan half dragged Caleb forward, and I ran beside them, my chest on fire. The sound behind us slowed. One last heavy step. Then, silence. We burst out of the tree line, straight onto the dirt road. The truck screeched to a stop, horn blaring. We collapsed right in front of it, gasping, faces down in the mud. The driver climbed out, shouting something we couldn't make out. His boots thudded toward us. When I looked back, the hill was empty. The fog hung still and low, every tree standing in perfect stillness. But up near the top of Ridgeback Hill, through the fog, there was something, a single figure, standing straight now. Long arms, head tilted sideways, watching. We didn't stay to see it move. The driver helped us into the truck, muttering about drunk campers and mountain cats. We didn't argue. He drove us down to the main road while the hill disappeared behind us. Later, when we went back to look for Caleb's camera, it was gone. No sign of it, not even the strap. 3 weeks passed. I thought maybe it would fade. The fear, the sound, the way my stomach turned every time fog rolled in. Then a package came. No return address, just my name, printed plain. Inside was a small USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop, half curious, half sick to my stomach. Only one file was on it, 12 seconds long. The video showed our camp from above, the 3 tents glowing faintly under the moon. The angle was too high for a person. The camera was shaking, as if held by something that breathed too loud. You could hear it, the sound of a person, or whatever had taken the camera, breathing hard in the cold. And right before the clip ended, the image shifted, showing the slope where we had run. A whisper slid through the speaker. It said my name. Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. You ever let someone step into your space just because you didn't want to be rude? Maybe they smiled the right way, or acted familiar enough, and for half a second, you ignored your gut. I've thought about that moment more times than I can count. If I just kept walking. I moved back to the Norton area late October, just for 6 weeks. The energy company had me surveying ground conditions for a wind farm project up in the old mining hills. I rented a cheap cabin at the far end of Ash Branch Road. Quiet place. Last on the path. It used to belong to my great uncle, or so my mom said. The land, there's old. Real old. You can still find stone foundations where houses used to stand before the mines shut down. Most of the families left by the early 82nds. But some homes just rotted in place, like the one halfway up the ridge, tucked behind the tree line with its chimney still standing and porch steps sunken into the brush. I'd been walking the edge of that property the first time I saw him. Late afternoon, golden hour sliding in. I was scanning the slope with my phone GPS, trying to mark elevation changes. Then I looked up. There was a man standing in the middle of the overgrown field. Gray coat, maybe mid-60s. He didn't wave, didn't move, just gave this slight, closed-mouth smile, like he'd been waiting for someone to notice him. I called out a hello. He nodded once, then turned and walked away toward the abandoned house. The grass barely shifted as he moved. I stood there a second longer, then laughed under my breath. Probably some off-grid guy, or someone from town checking on the land. Folks out here kept to themselves. I knew that. The next morning, I passed the house again on foot, headed up to the higher ridge line. The same man was sitting on the porch this time, elbows on his knees. When he saw me, he gave a little wave, slow and almost childlike. I hesitated, then nodded back. "You from the survey team?" he asked, voice low and flat. "Yeah," I said, "just out here marking terrain for a few weeks." "Is CK?" He gestured behind him. "Got some real old rocks under the floorboards. Rare stuff. You ever seen shale fossils?" In my now and reclined to the mass of the messes. I smiled, polite but guarded. "Not up close. Because, come take a look if you want. Won't take long." That work. I told him I was short on time, but I took a few steps up onto the porch anyway, just to not seem rude. He crouched near a loose board and began to pry it up. The sound made my skin itch. His hand, when he braced it against the floor, moved wrong. It bent backward at the wrist, fingers dragging slightly behind, like they didn't quite follow. I didn't say anything, just took a step back, mumbled something about getting back before the light changed. He didn't respond, just kept looking at the board like I wasn't even there anymore. I walked away fast. Didn't run, but close. Back at the cabin, I sat on the porch with a coffee and tried to laugh it off. Told myself he probably had arthritis, or an old injury. Plenty of folks move differently out here. Not my business. That night, I made dinner just past 8. Cold night, soup on the stovetop. I had the radio on low. Then, without warning, the lights flickered out. All of them. Total dark for maybe 3 seconds. Not unusual. Honestly, that whole end of the road loses power during hard wind or temperature drops. But when the lights came back, I noticed the front door was open. Not wide, just a crack. But I had locked it. I was sure I had. I walked to it slowly. The air outside was still. Nothing in the yard. No sound. I shut the door and threw the latch. Then I looked down. Right there, In the middle of the wooden floor, just past the threshold, was a dried mark in the shape of a hand. Too long, fingers stretched unnaturally far. The outline of it flaked and pale, like dirt clinging to old skin. I cleaned the floor with a towel I didn't bother keeping after, locked every window, drew the curtains even though there was nothing but trees outside. That night, I didn't sleep so much as sit still and wait for morning. By 7, I packed my bag and left. No coffee, no breakfast. I drove straight into Norton and waited outside the land office until the lights came on. The woman behind the counter looked like she'd been there forever, calm, in a way that made me feel stupid for being shaken. I told her someone might have broken into the cabin, that I saw movement around one of the old mining houses. She nodded slowly, like none of it was new. Probably just some kids messing around, she said. You'd be surprised what folks get up to when nobody's living out that way. It made sense. Kind of. Enough to settle me down for a bit. I said thanks, picked up a few things from the hardware store, and decided to head back to the cabin and pack up properly. Maybe stay in a motel for a couple days. Reset. The drive back felt longer. Every bend in the road stretched out. Every patch of forest looked still in that too silent way. I turned onto the dirt track leading up to the cabin. That was when I saw the truck. An old pickup, dark red or brown, sat just far enough behind me that I couldn't read the plate. I figured it was someone local. But when I turned left onto the narrower fork, it turned too. No signal. No pause. I slowed a little. So did they. There were 3 sharp curves before the cabin. I took them faster than usual, tires slipping slightly in the gravel. The truck stayed close. Not aggressive. Just following. I checked the mirror again. No driver I could make out, just a shape behind the glass. Then I reached the last bend. I took it hard, and when I straightened out, the road ahead was empty. For one moment, I thought maybe I'd lost them. Then I looked back. The truck was stopped, dead still, and someone was stepping out of my cabin. It was him, the man in the gray coat. Only now he was holding something long and metal, like a pipe or a piece of rebar. I didn't think. I floored the gas. The tires spun once before catching. Gravel kicked up behind me as the truck in the mirror started moving again. Faster now. Closer. My chest locked up. Hands gripped the wheel tighter than they needed to. I passed the gatepost and tore down the hill toward the main road. Every time I checked the mirror, the pickup was there. Headlights off. Gaining. I swerved onto the paved stretch just as another car crested the opposite rise. The truck behind me dropped back just enough not to be seen clearly by the oncoming vehicle. When I finally reached the edge of town and pulled into the gas station lot, I sat there for a long time. Engine running, heart thudding against the seatbelt. The truck never passed by. I didn't go back. Told the company I needed a transfer. They moved me to a site near Roanoke, and I never asked about the project again. But something stayed with me. Now, anytime someone moves their hand the wrong way, even just a weird flick of the wrist, I feel it. That kick of instinct. That jolt in the spine like something's about to reach for you. Once, at a grocery store, I saw a stock boy bend his arm backward to lift a shelf. Perfectly normal. Perfectly human. But I dropped a bottle of water on the spot. Couldn't breathe right for 2 full minutes. And sometimes, even now, I wonder what would have happened if I'd stepped just a little farther into that house. If I'd smiled back, said yes, crossed the threshold. I should have asked him more questions the moment I noticed his eyes never left the ground. That thought keeps coming back to me, over and over, like it's trying to warn me from somewhere I can't reach anymore. I hadn't seen Drew in almost 4 years. He'd left the city after his father died and stopped answering most messages, except the short one he sent last month. You should come down. It's quiet here. So I took a few days off and drove out to that part of Kentucky where the ridges meet the old mining trails. His cabin sat near the edge of a gully, where the land dipped sharply into the woods. November air had that thin, metallic bite, and the forest floor was buried in brown leaves. It looked peaceful in that kind of way that only emptiness can manage. Drew met me at the edge of the clearing. He looked thinner than I remembered, but his voice still carried that calm drawl. We hugged awkwardly, like two people who hadn't figured out how to bridge the years between them. He'd built the cabin himself. Just a few rooms, plywood walls, and a porch that leaned. Inside was clean, if a little bare. I dropped my bag and joked that it looked like a place people came to disappear. He smiled, but didn't answer. We spent the afternoon walking the trails around his land. The air was still. No birds, just the sound of our boots in the leaves. About an hour in, Drew stopped so suddenly I almost bumped into him. He was staring at the ground ahead. A line of footprints crossed the trail, bare feet, small but clear, pressed deep into the wet leaves. They didn't go anywhere, just started and stopped in the middle of the woods. "Kids," I said, crouching. The prints were pale, like the mud had been turned up from underneath. "Hikers. Maybe." "It's not was provided." Drew shook his head slowly. "No camps out here. Not anymore. This is no way." He kept staring. "Too long." I tried to laugh it off, but he didn't move until the light started to fade. Only then did he step around the prints carefully, like he didn't want to disturb them. Back at the cabin, I made us coffee on the little propane stove. Drew barely spoke, eyes darting toward the window now and then. When I asked if he was doing all right, he said he was just not sleeping much. "Too many sounds at night," he added quietly. I tried to keep it light, told him city noise was worse. He smiled at that, but it didn't reach his eyes. Later that evening, I caught him standing outside, staring into the woods again. No flashlight, no coat, just stillness. When I asked what he was looking at, he said, "Footprints. They don't last long, but they always come back. Now, these better. The master now." I didn't know what to say to that. I told him he should get some rest, that I'd drive him back to town in the morning. He didn't answer, just nodded once and went back inside. The next morning, the first thing I saw when I stepped out of the cabin was another line of bare footprints. These were closer, almost at the steps, each toe marked clear, pointing toward the door. There were no prints leading away. When I called for Drew, he was already outside, sweeping them away with a branch. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just brushed the dirt until nothing showed. I tried to laugh it off, said maybe it was a prank. Maybe kids from the next valley were trying to scare him. He said there wasn't anyone left in the next valley. That night, the forest went too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. I sat awake long after Drew stopped moving around inside. Then, sometime near midnight, a voice whispered outside the window. Soft, almost kind. "Come with me." Nowhere question. I froze. My body went cold all at once. The whisper came again, closer to the wall this time. "Come with me." In Weiss. I turned toward Drew's cot, but he was already sitting up, staring at the window. He didn't move, didn't blink. I whispered his name, but he didn't answer. Just before dawn, I dozed off in the chair by the stove. When I woke, Drew was gone. The cabin door stood half open, cold air pouring in. On the table was a torn sheet of paper, written in pencil, "If I don't come back, follow the footprints." I stepped outside and saw them, bare prints leading away from the porch, heading straight down into the gully. Only one direction, no path back. And I followed them. I followed them down the slope. Each bare print was pressed deep into the leaf-covered ground, spaced evenly like someone was walking slow and steady. The air got colder the lower I went, the trees pulling tighter around me. I kept calling Drew's name, but the sound didn't carry far. The gully narrowed quick, with walls rising on either side, damp with moss and shaded by old black walnut trees. I lost signal on my phone before I hit the bottom. No wind, no birds, just those footsteps ahead, getting fresher somehow, like they weren't made long ago. That was when I saw the shack. It leaned into the curve of the ravine, half collapsed, its metal roof sagging and covered in leaves. The door was open just enough to see the dark inside. The footprints led straight to it. I stepped closer, heart thudding in my throat, called for Drew again. No answer. I crossed the threshold. Inside smelled like mold and ash. The floor creaked under me, soft in places, and there were broken crates stacked in the corner. A few glass jars, a rusted lantern, and something like a jacket hung on a nail. But no Drew. I turned to leave. The door slammed shut behind me. I jolted back, heart racing, and rushed to it. It wouldn't budge. I threw my shoulder into the wood. Once, twice. Then I heard them. Footsteps, light and fast, circling the shack. Bare feet. They moved in tight loops, brushing against the outside walls. Then silence. Then a whisper. Mason. Reself. I didn't wait. I found the smallest window, jammed near the roof, and climbed up. The glass cracked under my elbow as I forced myself through. My jacket tore. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and scrambled up into a crouch. That was when I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the gully, no more than 20 feet away. Tall, too tall. Its hair hung like wet rope over its face, and its arms dangled almost to its knees. The feet were bare, toes sunk into the mud. It didn't speak, didn't move. But I did. I turned and ran. Up the ravine, slipping on loose rock and wet leaves. My legs burned. I scraped my palm on something sharp, but I didn't stop. I could hear it behind me. Not close. Not far. Just there. The prints were everywhere now. Both sides of the trail. Like others had come this way. Like they never left. Then, from the ridge above, I heard someone shout my name. Drew. I looked up and saw him leaning over the edge, one hand outstretched. Climb, he yelled. Now. Ding. Wing. Wingred. I didn't think. I grabbed at rocks, roots, anything that would hold. Slipped once, felt something tug at my ankle, but kicked free. Drew reached down and yanked me the rest of the way up. Hard. We didn't stop running until the cabin came into view. We left that day, packed what we could in silence. I didn't ask him what he saw. He didn't explain the note, or the footprints, or the thing in the ravine. A few months later, Drew disappeared. No phone calls, no messages. His place stood empty when I came back to check. The police asked questions. I told them the truth, or the parts I could. Just said, if you ever see barefoot prints in the woods that don't lead back the way they came, don't follow them. I still wake up sometimes thinking I hear bare feet on the floor. Just soft taps in the hallway. It's probably nothing, but I never go check. The truck handled poorly on the ridge roads in November. Wet leaves over clay turned the corners slick. And even four-wheel drive didn't mean much once the incline caught you wrong. I took it slow past the switchbacks and didn't say a word until the trees opened up around the ranger station. Some stretches of forest never felt like they wanted people in them. My name's Joel Hargrove. I'm 37. Been with Forestry Services 15 years. Most of that in Tennessee. For the last 6 months, they had me on Red Clay Ridge rotation. 6 days on, solo, then a handoff once a month when the weather permitted. The job was simple. Mostly trail checks, poaching signs, storm damage reports. It was isolation work, the kind I didn't mind. I got used to the quiet years ago. That week started like any other. Cold mornings, heavy wind through the canopy. Wildlife prints near the runoff spots. The only signal on that ridge came from a sliver of rock face near marker post 12, just enough to send messages out. Not really enough to talk. I used it twice a day. Just the usual check-ins. Then I found the first marker. It was near the old fire route by Barlow Creek, about a mile past the no-entry boundary. Somebody had hammered a wooden stake into the ground. There was twine wrapped around the top, tied tight, and fixed to it, held by wire, was what looked like a small animal bone. I crouched beside it. The bone was clean, maybe from a raccoon. Weathered, but not old. The way it was mounted made it feel deliberate. At first, I figured it was survivalist junk. We got those sometimes. Off-grid campers, marking trails, setting up DIY boundary warnings. I photographed the marker, logged it, and pulled it up. Packed it out in the truck bed with the rest of the day's haul. Didn't think twice. The next morning, I found another one. Same construction. Different spot. It was just outside the old North Overlook station, right where I had walked the evening before. Same type of bone. Same twine. Planted firm in the ground like it had been waiting for me. That unsettled me a little. I sent the photos through radio text. Weather was overcast, though, and the signal flickered. No reply came back by nightfall. I cleaned the area, removed both markers, burned the twine, buried the bones, locked up the cabin tight that night. Something about the air felt too still. No wind, no animal sounds, just the creaking of the walls and the slow tick of my watch. By morning, I almost convinced myself it was over. Then I stepped outside. There, in the dirt path leading from the cabin to the water catchment tank, was another marker. This one had a larger bone, flat and white, maybe a scapula, and it had been pressed deep into the soil with a loop of twine beside it, coiled in a spiral. And on the tree nearest the cabin, I saw it. A faint smudge, low to the ground, palm print height, not smeared like mud, just a dull spot where the bark had been touched, held, as if someone had been standing there, hand resting against the tree, watching. I didn't sleep that night, just sat by the cabin window, radio on, hand on the pistol. The forest didn't make a single sound. And for the first time since I took the job, I started to wish someone else was up there with me. I left at first light, packed the rifle, the radio, 2 bottles of water, and started toward Ridge 12 where the signal held steady. The forest was wet and gray, fog hanging low between the trees. The kind of morning where sound doesn't travel far. My boots sank deep into the clay. Half a mile in, I saw another marker. Same build, fresh earth around the base. The bone was darker this time, like it hadn't dried yet. Someone had planted it ahead of me. I stood there longer than I should have, scanning the tree line, trying to catch movement. Nothing. I tore it up, broke it in half, and kept moving. My radio buzzed twice as the signal tried to connect. I managed to send a short distress ping before the battery light started flashing red. The air felt heavier by the minute. By the time I reached the lower ridge crossing, I could tell someone had followed me. The ground was damp from last night's rain, and my tracks weren't alone anymore. A second set overlapped mine. Longer stride, deeper print. The mud still looked wet. I froze. My heart started counting seconds instead of beats. Every sound from the woods snapped sharper. The drip of water, a branch falling, a crow somewhere far away. I turned a slow circle, rifle in hand, waiting for the reason behind that extra pair of steps. It came soon after. The sound of feet on leaves, quick and deliberate, closing the distance behind me. I spun around, flashlight cutting through fog. A man stood halfway down the slope. He wore a dark jacket with the hood up, face lost in shadow. His right hand held a stick or rod, metal hooked at the end. Maybe something scavenged, He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, like he was waiting for me to recognize him. I raised the rifle. My voice cracked when I told him to stop. He tilted his head, slow, like he was listening to something behind me. Then he started walking, straight toward me. I fired once. The echo shattered across the valley, scattering birds. He didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. I ran. Branches whipped across my face. My pack slammed against my back as I slid through mud and brush, losing my footing on the steep ground. The sound of his footsteps chased mine, uneven but fast. I could hear him breathing, short, rough gasps between strides. The slope dropped suddenly. I caught the edge wrong and fell. The world turned sideways as I rolled through wet leaves and rock until I slammed against something solid. Pain flared in my shoulder, white hot, but I stayed still, listening. No sound, only wind through dead branches. I pushed myself up, rifle gone, hand slick with blood from a scrape across my palm. When I looked back toward the ridge, he was gone, completely. I didn't wait to see where he went. I ran until the ground leveled out, until I reached the service trail that cut toward the ranger outpost on the other side of the valley. My legs were shaking by the time I saw the metal roof of the station glint through the trees. I didn't stop running until I was inside. They found my truck 2 days later near the cabin, untouched. The log sheets were still in order, only one thing out of place, and a single wooden stake driven into the ground beside the porch, bone tied to the top with clean rope. I asked to be reassigned, closer to town, somewhere with people around. That was last year. Now, even off duty, I keep the gun close. I tell myself it's habit, not fear. But every few weeks, on the edge of some trail or clearing, I still catch sight of it. A stick planted upright, a bit of white tied to the top, always facing me. That one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. Now, Story 6. If you ever work a night shift at the Ridgeline weather station and find your name in the logbook at a time you know you were asleep, pack your things and leave. No questions. Just go. That entry was written in blue ink, squeezed into the margin of page 43. I didn't notice it until the second day. It wasn't signed. My name is Sean Rivera. I was 28 then, running tech rotations for the seasonal crew across 5 stations in West Virginia. Ridgeline was the most remote, a squat, concrete-sided cabin with a wind tower and 3 old cameras monitoring the surrounding woods. No phone service, just a battery-powered radio and a backup generator that hated cold mornings. Wyatt and I were assigned 5 days up there. He was new, transferred from a station out in Arizona, more used to desert than the Appalachian cold. We split the shifts, 12 on, 12 off. My nights, his days. The logbook tracked everything. Equipment readings, system alerts, even things like when you went outside or refilled the fuel drums. No digital backups, just handwriting. You miss a line, you get written up. Pretty simple. The first night was quiet, low wind, steady pressure, no rainfall. I made my entries at 12:04 a.m. and again at 2:47 a.m. Then I went to bed. I remember lying there, staring at the rafters, thinking about the kind of people who actually lived out here year-round. Next morning, over coffee, Wyatt flipped the book toward me. "Did you go out again last night?" he asked. There it was, an entry at 3:12 a.m. Stepped out to check anemometer obstruction. All clear. The S. R. My initials, my handwriting, even the little slant I made when I wrote numbers. But I never wrote that. I said maybe I was too groggy to remember. Maybe I got up, saw something, Logged it out of habit. Wyatt shrugged, unconvinced. That evening, he set the monitors to pull internal footage from the night before. We watched it after dinner. At 3:12 a.m., the hallway camera showed me, or someone, standing still in front of the equipment room. No motion, no blinking, just facing the camera with that same glazed-over look you get when you're sleepwalking. I didn't move for 45 seconds. Then the screen went black. The feed picked up again at 3:14. Back to normal. Lights steady. No one there. I checked my arms for scratches or signs of walking into furniture. Nothing. My bed was still made up the same. I started thinking maybe Wyatt was screwing with the footage, but that would mean he faked my handwriting too. Day 2 passed without anything weird. I stayed up the whole night, double-checking every hour, making notes. All the cameras stayed on. All my entries were mine. That calm didn't last long. On the third night, Wyatt stayed up with me. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both wanted to see if something would happen again. I made a pot of strong coffee and set the internal camera feeds to display live across both monitors. It felt like a stakeout, only quieter and colder. The wind picked up around 2:30. Nothing unusual, just a soft hum through the roof vents. We played cards, checked the instruments. Then the hallway light blinked once, dimmed, and held steady. At exactly 3:01 a.m., I opened the logbook to kill time. There was already a line written in it, right there between 2:47 and where I had planned to write next. I stepped out to check the hallway, light flicker. All normal. H-hit. It was signed, Sean Rivera. I was still holding my pen. The ink was fresh. My handwriting again. Same exact angle. Wyatt looked at it, then at me. You didn't write that just now. I didn't answer. My chest had gone tight. We pulled up the camera footage. Fast-forwarding to 3:01. Nothing. Just an empty hallway. Lights flickering once, then back to normal. No one moved through. No door opened. No shadow. But the logbook still had my name in it. Wyatt suggested we check the external hard drive, the one that backed up the outer perimeter cam, usually quiet unless a deer wandered too close. We loaded it, scrubbing through the last 2 nights. Nothing for hours. Then a short blip at 4:17 a.m. the night before. It was shaky, maybe wind-triggered, but when we paused it, something was visible between the trees. A figure, standing very still. From the back, it looked like me. Same jacket, same build, just standing there, far from the cabin, facing us. Neither of us said a word for a long time. That night, we agreed to sleep in shifts. Wyatt took the first. I lay down on the cot, staring at the ceiling, not really sleeping. At some point, I must have drifted off. Then I heard footsteps overhead. Not creaking, not a possum. Definite, heavy pacing. I sat up. Wyatt was already grabbing his flashlight. We both went up together, slow and quiet, expecting maybe a branch had fallen or something had settled. The roof was empty. We scanned it corner to corner. Frost on the shingles. No footprints. Back downstairs. Though, something was off. The logbook was open again. A new line. Went up to check roof noise. Nothing there. Back in 5. You know way. Signed, Wyatt. He hadn't touched the pen all night. We stared at the page, then at each other. The camera feed for the hallway showed a figure walking across frame at 4:33 a.m. Not quite right. Shoulders too stiff. Head tilted slightly to the left. And when we paused the frame, the face was blurred. Not like a bad camera lens, but like it didn't belong to either of us. That was enough. We packed up before dawn and left the station 2 days early. No explanations given. Back home, I removed every camera in my apartment, even the doorbell one. I keep a logbook now, just for peace of mind. Every morning, I check it before I brush my teeth, And once or twice a month, there's a single entry I don't remember writing. Always short, always calm. And sometimes it's signed Wyatt. I thought I just needed a reset, a few months of peace, nothing more. That was why I moved back to Elk Hollow in early November, into my grandmother's old house at the very end of Barlow Lane. It had been sitting empty since she passed, but the pipes still worked and the roof held steady through the first frost. The nearest neighbor was Miss Lucille, an older woman I'd known since childhood. Her house sat just past the tree line, across a narrow field of dry grass and stacked wood. We weren't close, but she always waved when I arrived. Always had some porch decoration up that changed with the seasons. I liked that. It made the street feel less abandoned. Most mornings were quiet. I'd wake early, make coffee, and answer a few emails before the fog lifted off the backyard. The house creaked a little, but nothing out of the ordinary. Sometimes deer passed through, sometimes a fox. It was the first time in years I had slept without earplugs. So when I found the first one, I told myself it was nothing, just a loop of straw, neatly twisted, sitting right in the center of my front doorstep. I assumed it had blown in from somewhere, maybe something Miss Lucille had been working on. I picked it up, tossed it in the compost bin, and didn't think much of it. But the next morning, there was another one. This one was different. The same size, same circular shape, but made of small, smooth stones stacked into a perfect ring. It had been placed by the side of the house, under the window that faced the woods. I went to check on Miss Lucille that afternoon, thinking maybe she had left them as a gift, or a joke. But her house was dark, curtains drawn, mailbox full. No one answered when I knocked, and her front gate was latched from the inside. That night, I stayed up later than usual, watching some show I didn't really care about. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps, not on the porch, but around the side of the house, slow and careful. They stopped by the back door, but no one knocked. I didn't move, just sat there on the couch, holding my breath, waiting. When I finally looked, there was nothing, no sound, no sign anyone had been there. But I didn't sleep. The next day, I found a third ring, this time made of thin pieces of metal, twisted into a tight spiral and left at the base of the back steps. It was almost intentional, like someone wanted me to notice the pattern. I asked the sheriff's office about Miss Lucille. They said she'd disappeared for a few days before and always came back. Not to worry. Old folks get restless sometimes, one deputy said. She probably went to stay with her niece in Martin Hollow. It sacked to me. I nodded, pretended to agree. That night, nothing happened. No footsteps. No noise. But the morning after that, I opened my front door and just stood there. Not because of another ring, though there was one. This one was the worst yet. A perfect circle of paring knives. For my own kitchen, arranged on the mat, and next to it, barely visible in the morning frost, was a single footprint. Bare, human, and pressed so clearly into the dirt that I could see the space between the toes. I locked every door in the house. I checked the windows twice, stuffed towels along the sills, dragged a chair in front of the back door. Then I called the sheriff's office again and left a message, telling them about the knives and the footprint. They said they'd send someone in the morning, but I already knew what that meant. I was on my own for the night. I grabbed the largest knife I had left and stayed in the bedroom. Door locked. Lights on. I didn't try to sleep. I sat in the corner, eyes on the hallway, listening for any sound out of place. Every board creak made my skin tighten. Around midnight, something changed. The light in the living room flickered once. Then again. Then it went out completely. I didn't hear anything at first, just the soft tick of cooling bulbs, until I caught it, the barest shuffle, like feet on linoleum. I crept to the door and peeked through the crack. Down the hallway, Someone stood in the dark. Their back was to me. They were still. Too still. Like they were waiting for something. I didn't think. I threw my weight against the window, cracked it open wide enough to crawl through. The screen popped loose as I dropped onto the cold earth below. I scraped my knees but didn't stop. I ran full speed down the driveway toward the main road. No shoes. No coat. When I glanced back, once, only once, the figure was standing at the window, watching, holding something glinting in the porch light. Another circle, I think, made of metal, something I had never seen before. I didn't go back to that house, not even for my clothes. 3 days later, I officially gave up the place. Put in the paperwork to transfer the title. Let the family lawyers handle the rest. I stayed in a motel until I could find an apartment in the city. But here's the thing. In the new place, 5th floor, deadbolt on the door, neighbors on all sides. I still don't sleep well. Last week, I woke up at 3 a.m. There was something on the carpet just inside the front door. A loop of twine, wound tightly, tied in a perfect circle. You think the worst sound in the world is a knock at the door in the middle of the night. But what if the knock comes from inside the wall? The first night in that cabin, I woke at 2-3 a.m. to 3 soft taps. Measured. Even, not loud. More like someone rapped a knuckle against wood just once every few seconds. The sound came from the front door. I thought, so I got up, pulled on my jacket, and looked. No one there. The cold outside felt solid enough to hold in your hands. Wind moved the trees, but everything else was still. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe wood expanding and the temperature drop. I shut the door, went back to bed, and tried to forget how human that rhythm had sounded. My name's Daniel McKay. I'm 41, a contractor mostly working renovation jobs across the Ridge counties. The church had hired me for a month to restore their small hillside chapel before winter set in. They rented the cabin for me, an old parsonage that hadn't been lived in since the early 2000s. It was small but sturdy, and I didn't mind being alone. The second night, I woke again. Same hour. 3 knocks. Only this time, the sound didn't come from the door. It came from the wall beside my bed, the wall that faced the cliffside. No crawl space, no adjoining room, just solid timber against rock. The tapping was faint but deliberate. I pressed my ear to it. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to pull back, a single tap came from inside, right against where my head had been. I barely slept after that. The next day, I checked every inch of that wall. Insulation seams, old vent holes, loose nails. Found nothing. The church overseer said the cabin had been empty for 15 years, used mostly for storage before they cleaned it up for me. He joked about raccoons. I laughed too, but my chest felt tight. That evening, I lit the fire early. The wind outside picked up, rolling down the ridge like surf. I sat at the kitchen table, reading, until a faint whisper broke through the crackle of the fire. It came from the wall behind the stove. I froze. It wasn't the wind. I could hear words, not clear, but shaped like speech. A breathy pattern, low, close, then something like, "Come out, look, we in perfect 9. I turned the lights on, hit the wall with the flat of my hand. The voice stopped. For a moment, all I could hear was my own pulse. By midnight, I'd convinced myself it was air pressure, or the old chimney shifting sound. I left the radio on for noise, made some tea, and tried to distract myself with work notes. I remember glancing at the clock at 1:59, thinking maybe I'd sleep after all. At 2:03, it started again. 3 knocks. Same rhythm. Then silence. I waited. Breath held. The cabin creaked, settling under the weight of the cold. And then came a different sound. Slow, dragging, from beneath the floorboards. It moved from the kitchen to the living room, light as fingernails over wood. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped down the narrow stairs. The smell hit me first. Dry wood mixed with ash from the fireplace above. In the corner of the floor, near the furnace vent, dust had been disturbed. A clear handprint pressed into the gray soot. 5 fingers. Too long. Too deep. I followed its direction toward the front window, and that's when I saw it. A shape standing close to the glass. Not outside on the porch, but right against the window, face turned inward. The outline didn't move, didn't breathe. When I flicked the light toward it, the beam hit nothing but reflection. The glass was empty, but the handprint on the floor was still there. I backed away from the window and locked every door I could reach. The silence after that moment felt unnatural, stretched thin, like the house itself was holding its breath. I took the flashlight and climbed to the attic, thinking maybe I could wait out whatever this was until morning. The boards groaned beneath me as I pulled myself through the hatch. The attic smelled like dust and cedar. A single bulb hung from a wire, barely lighting the low rafters. I sat near a stack of old hymn books and boxes of church linens, listening. The house was still again, until the sound came back. 3 knocks. Not from the door, not from below. From the ceiling, right above where I sat. My throat tightened. The flashlight flickered as if the air itself had thickened. I stood up, shining the beam around, half expecting to see someone crouched in the corner. There was nothing, only a few strands of dark hair caught on a splinter of wood near the far wall, swaying slightly in the draft. I don't remember sleeping. Maybe I drifted. Maybe I just lost track of time. When I next looked at my watch, it was 3:12. The power cut out a moment later. The whole cabin went black except for the blue shimmer of the stove flame below filtering through the cracks in the floor. Then came the footsteps. Soft, steady, deliberate, crossing the living room. I could hear breathing between each step. Close. Too close. I held the flashlight, finger tight on the switch. The air vibrates when something unseen is in it. You can feel pressure before you hear sound. That's how it felt, like the room itself leaned toward me. The steps stopped outside the attic door. I could see a sliver of movement through the narrow seam of light, a shadow passing across it. Slow as fog. The handle turned just enough to click. I whispered to myself, "Don't open. Don't open." The sound that followed wasn't a knock but a push. A single thud that made the door bow inward. Wood creaking under pressure. I stepped back, heart hammering, waiting for it to give way. Then, nothing. The pressure faded. When I finally forced myself to move, I opened the door. The hall below was empty, every light out, except the faint glow from the stove. On the wall, across from the stairs, 5 handprints had appeared. The same size, same spacing, pressed deep into the wood, as if something had pushed through from behind it. By dawn, I packed what I could and left the key on the table. I didn't look back until I reached the ridge road. From there, I saw the front door still ajar, moving slightly in the wind. And even from that distance, through the thin morning air, I swear I heard it again. 3 slow knocks, echoing up from the cabin, from somewhere deep inside the wall. I'm really glad you've stayed with me this far. Before we move on to the next story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss any of our new videos every single day. Now then, let's continue. I hadn't been back to Blackstone Hollow in over 12 years. The road looked the same. Tight switchbacks, dirt shoulders that dropped straight into brush, and no signs past the gas station. My father used to say that's how you knew it was a good hunting spot, the kind of place no one bothered to map. I believed him then. The trailer sat just where he left it, sunk a little deeper into the slope. The tires dry-rotted into the dirt. I unlocked the door and had to lean my shoulder into it before it gave. Inside, It still smelled like matches and wool. The cot sagged more than I remembered, and a line of dead beetles trailed along the windowsill. He used to bring me up here every winter break. Said a boy needed cold air in his lungs and a little silence to grow right. I never shot anything. I mostly read or helped clean the old rifles while he tracked deer into the ridge. I guess that stuck more than the hunting did. He passed in March. Massive heart attack. Quick and quiet. The property was mine now, and I figured I'd come up before snow hit. See if the trailer could be salvaged. Maybe pulled out with the right truck. If not, I'd cut it apart and let it rot with the rest of the valley. There was no signal past mile marker 8. My calls dropped, and even text bars disappeared. I didn't mind. I brought books, food, a knife. I lit the old oil lamp he kept by the door, just like he did, and sat down at the fold-out table with a dog-eared copy of The Crossing. Around 9, I saw a light through the side window. It was faint, white, not flickering like a fire or lantern, more like the thin edge of a flashlight moving sideways through fog. I stepped outside with my own lamp and called out. No answer. Just the wind in the trees and the high, thin whine of something electric dying in the air. I stood there a while longer, listening. The light didn't return. It hadn't moved like a person. Not exactly. It had drifted, then blinked out. I told myself it was a hunter. Maybe someone checking a trail or looking for their dog. It was late in the season, but folks still came up this far. The next morning, I walked to the ridge where I thought the light had come from. Nothing there. No tire marks. No footprints. The ground was frozen hard. The grass stiff and white. No way someone had walked through without leaving anything behind. The cold came early that evening. By 5, the trees were already sinking into fog. I stayed inside and kept the oil lamp low, just enough to read. I left the stove off. The heat drew too much noise. Just after 10, I heard footsteps. Soft. Too soft for boots. Too clean for deer. Circling the trailer. I turned off the lamp. Outside, the light turned off too, like someone had been waiting to match me. I held still, one hand on the handle of my knife, the other resting on the window edge. Nothing moved. No knock. No voice. Just the slow pressure of something aware of me. I slept with my boots on that night, or tried to. The third night, I stopped pretending I was just imagining it. I packed my gear before dark, threw it all in the back seat, and left only the lamp and a canteen inside the trailer. The cold was sharp enough to crack wood if you listened long enough. I sat in the front seat of the truck, key halfway turned, knife on the dash. Around midnight, the light came back. But this time it was closer, low to the ground, like someone crouched just below the window with a flashlight aimed sideways. The beam cut under the trailer, then swept across the dirt toward the back. I turned the ignition. Headlights flared. That was when I saw the figure standing at the end of the path, right in the middle of the track that led to the road. It didn't move. No sound. Just the narrow outline of shoulders and a head. Arms low. The flashlight beam cut behind it now, shining straight into my windshield. I yanked the wheel and gunned it. The truck bucked as I swerved off the path, tires biting loose gravel and dead leaves. I didn't look back. The road down was rough and narrow, but I didn't care. I just kept going, the headlights bouncing through the dark. Halfway down the slope, one tire slipped. The truck leaned, front wheel spinning. I cursed, grabbed the handbrake, and jumped out. The whole hillside smelled like ice and engine heat. I shoved a rock under the rear tire, heart pounding in my ears. Then I saw it. 2 lights in the trees above the slope. Not headlights, not flashlights either. White, cold, standing still between the trunks. I didn't hear them approach, but I heard the sound they made now. Rocks shifting, leaves cracking, like someone adjusting their weight just beyond the tree line. I pulled the knife from the dashboard and backed toward the driver's side. The lights did not move. They watched. Waited. Like they knew I had to stop here. Like they had always known. I threw the truck into reverse, kicked off the rock, and floored it. The wheels caught and the engine roared, dirt flying up around me. I didn't slow down until the woods broke open and the main road came into view. I made it back to the highway just before dawn. Never told anyone the full story. Sold the truck. Let the trailer rot. Now I live in a place with streetlights, houses on both sides, people close enough to hear if you yell. But every so often, a flashlight beam sweeps across the edge of my window. Just some neighbor taking the trash out. I tell myself that every time, even when the light stops, even when it stays still, aim straight through the glass. It would have been Lily's 9th birthday. She died 2 years ago. Car accident. Middle of a rainy afternoon in early November. Since then, I haven't stayed in one place long enough for the weather to feel familiar. Every year, when the month turns, I find somewhere quiet and far and let the days pass without anyone saying her name. This time, it was a cabin in Boone Gap. Old hunting place, just off a disused trail. High up in the hills where the fog stays late and there's no phone signal. I rented it under my full name. Told the owner I was a teacher on leave, which was true. I just didn't mention the leave was permanent. My name is Rachel Green, 35. I taught 3rd grade until I couldn't walk past Lily's classroom without hearing her laugh from a year that no longer exists. The first few days at the cabin passed the way I needed them to. Mornings were cold and gray. I drank bitter instant coffee by the fire and let the quiet gnaw at me. No internet. No cars. The wind moved like breath between the trees. Then one morning, before the light came up, I opened the front door and saw something on the step. It was a spiral. Small, maybe the size of a teacup saucer, made of tiny white bones, arranged with care, curved in on itself like a shell or a sleeping thing. I didn't touch it, just stood there, staring, until the chill crept into my feet. Then I kicked it into the yard and shut the door. Probably an animal dragged it in. Fox or raccoon. The woods are full of strange little bits if you look hard enough. The next morning, there was another. This time it sat on the back step. Same shape, same delicate bones. As if it had walked itself there during the night. I swept it off with a stick. Shut the door harder than I meant to. The air inside felt wrong afterward, like something had come in with me. That night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard singing. Soft, female, a lullaby, though I couldn't make out the words. The melody rose and fell gently, repeating every few seconds. It was coming from outside, somewhere near the front porch. I turned off the bathroom light and stood still. The song kept going. The same tune, like it had no beginning, no end. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I found both spirals again. One on the front step, one just inside the back door. I burned them in the stove. Didn't hesitate. The bones snapped loud in the flame, like dry twigs. The smell stayed in my throat all day. But that night, it was quiet. No singing. No sounds at all. I watched the trees through the curtain, waiting for movement. Nothing came. For a moment, I thought maybe it was done. Then came the 3rd night. Just after 1 in the morning, the lullaby returned. Softer now. Closer. This time, I opened the door. There was nothing on the porch but cold air and damp leaves. But on the ground, just past the step, someone had placed another spiral. Larger, thicker bones, arranged with more care than the others. I backed into the cabin and locked the door. That's when the lights flickered. One by one, bulbs dimmed and blinked, as if something moved past them in the walls. Then the old radio on the shelf crackled to life. Not music. Not static. A rhythm. Sha, hum, sha. Reverie died. the same as the lullaby. I didn't move, just stood there, listening. And outside, the spiral sat untouched in the dirt, waiting. I slammed the radio off, pulled every curtain shut, shoved the old chair against the front door, and turned on every light I could find. Even the little bulb in the fridge felt like it mattered. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I found the kitchen knife, sat at the table with it across my lap. The flashlight pointed at the door. Nothing happened for hours, just the wind pressing against the windows and the occasional groan from the beams above. When the sun came up, it felt like the world exhaled. No more singing, no new spiral on the porch, just dew on the steps and frost on the edge of the woodpile. I waited a long time before I moved. By 10, I had the car packed. Nothing fancy, just my bag, a box of notebooks, and the few groceries left. I locked the cabin behind me, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine caught on the second try. Halfway down the trail, I let myself believe it was over. The road was narrow, lined with gold and rust-colored trees, some of them already bare. My breath had just started to settle when the radio came on. By itself. I hadn't touched it. Soft at first. A lullaby. The same one. I reached over and shut it off. The music didn't stop. I pulled the cord out of the radio and tossed it on the passenger seat. The melody faded, but not all the way. For a few seconds, it still lingered in the speakers, like something finishing its last breath. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't stop. But by the time I reached the highway, the silence felt too thin, too temporary. I should have kept driving, but I turned back. The sun was low when I parked again at the cabin. The front door still locked, the spiral still sitting on the path. Something about it looked expectant. I stepped over it and went inside. The lights worked, but I didn't trust them. I lit the fire, sat in the armchair facing the windows, and waited. The shadows in the trees stretched longer than they should have. By nightfall, the cabin was almost completely dark. Not all at once. The lights died one by one, like someone pinching them out from a distance. In the end, only the fire stayed lit. That was when I saw them. 4 spirals, set in a perfect line across the floor, pointing from the hearth to the front door, each one made of bone, glinting faintly in the firelight. I held my breath. Then came the footsteps. Soft, bare. They circled the porch once, then again. Then the singing started just a hum, not words, low and slow, and the voice had changed. It sounded like mine. I stood, walked toward the door. The humming stopped. I opened it. Nothing, just trees, and wind, and something standing far off in the dark, too still to be part of the woods. A shape, a presence, watching. I shut the door and left that night. 3 days later, at the new place in the city, I opened the sliding door to the balcony just after sunrise. It was sitting in the corner. A small spiral, made of bone. Nobody could have reached up there. 5th floor, no fire escape, no ledge. And yet, sometimes, deep in the night, I still hear it. A lullaby with no words. And no ending. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.